Hi, after our brainstorming meeting a couple of weeks ago, we have found results on a paper, and I have decided that instead of waiting for the paper to be written, that maybe we can do like a short video and share that video with you. You let us know if this medium works out. I think it's much easier just to have a video, like a presentation of what the results are. Of course, there's no interaction on the questions, but we can do this at a later stage. But waiting until we write the draft might take too long. So why not share the results right away the day you have them? And so I want to tell you more or less what the results is and what is the story that we have in mind about what we're finding, why this is kind of relevant, and then hopefully we can have a conversation. If this is not useful for you, just let us know. I think that 10-15 minutes presentation might be a much better vehicle. So let's try it out and let's see if it works out. We don't even have a title. This is about verification in carbon accounting. And what we're trying to do is to understand what type of actions the firms take that will lead to a reduction in emissions in the future. So kind of our question is, what type of action and statements you can do today? Does having a target, does that actually reduces the emissions or creates incentives for firms to reduce emissions? I mean, if you're supposed to have a target, at some point in time, the emissions should go down. And of course, the time series might be short, but the question is, does it have any impact in the short run? And there are different forms of commitment that firms can do. Some of them can just claim to have a net zero target. Others go through the science-based target initiative. That's a much tougher way of targeting, and also there are some of them go through verification processes. So we want to understand what of these type of signals truly change the way the firms behave. So there are three data sources that we use. We use the emissions. This is joint work with people that are in Clarity AI. Clarity AI is a data and index provider from Spain. Jaime has been spending this semester with us here, and he just graduated from his PhD at the beginning of this year. And part of what we're trying to do here is to increase collaboration with data providers, and this is kind of our first example of this effort. Clarity AI produces a measurement of emissions because they don't only take the self-reported data from the CDP. They look at also the corporate social responsibility reports, what has been reported there, and they also do their own imputation methods. So something that is important in the carbon data is that about 80% of the scope 1 and 2 observations are imputed, in the sense that the firms did not report it, and then they have models, and in this case they use artificial intelligence and neural networks to try to predict what the emissions will be for the firms that have not reported. Always something important in imputation is that always you have what is called a precautionary principle. You tend to assume that the ones that are not reporting tend to be worse than the similar firm reporting. So if you have two identical firms, one reports, the other one doesn't report, you tend to assume that the one that does not report have higher emissions on average. And that is has an important implication on how we test for targets and so on. So let me start with describing the first figure that goes how the commitments are evolving. So as you can see in this data, the number of firms that are going up. This is a logarithmic scale of the number of firms that have a target, a commitment, whether or not the target is on efficiency or intensity or absolute targets or net zero and so on. So we're going to look at some of these forms of commitment, but one very interesting aspect that takes place is that you can see that firms are increasing in the number of commitments. They all have trends that are going up, and this is logarithmic scale, so the things that look like lines here actually are exponential in practice. So we have many firms that are committing to different forms, and we're going to pay attention to the science-based targets What we did was to look at the emissions that are not explained by industry, year, size, number of employees, etc. So take two firms, and we have a certain number of emissions. What we do is we run a regression, and at the regression we put many variables that are related to the firm characteristics, and then we take the residuals and we separate them between the ones that are being imputed versus the ones that are not being imputed. And you can see that the two cumulative distributions are different, that the proportion of firms that are here in the middle, you can see that this guy is crossing, the median is crossing earlier than the other. I think you can see this a little bit better on the stuff. So indeed what occurs is that the ones that are reporting, the green ones are the reporting. The ones that report have, on average, smaller emissions, and that's why you see that the cumulative distribution is moved to the left and is flatter. So the mean and the median are smaller. The ones that are not reporting have lower variance, that's why it's steeper, but it moves to the right. So it's kind of interesting because these properties are important in the estimation. Okay, so let me just show you kind of what the results are. The first result is to replicate something that has already happened in the data. It's a paper by Bolton and authors. They find that when you have a target or when you commit to a target, that actually has an impact on the total emissions of the firms. So this is a time series because we have several years and we have many firms. So in fact, actually, you can see that we have about 121,000 observations. And when you actually put a target, so you ask, do you have a target or not? The emissions come down. This is in percentage terms. So it's a significant number. This is total emissions, and this is the intensity. The intensity, in some sense, is kind of the efficiency, CO2 emissions divided by the revenue. I like the word efficiency, not intensity, but anyway. But they are very significant. By the way, just committing to a target also has an impact, okay, in the sense that and this is replicated in the literature. People have said that just having a commitment or just having a target has a positive effect. And in fact, when you put the two regressions together, even if you put the two, you can see that, they're going to be correlated, but they're all negative, they're all statistically significant. And this is a tremendously high number of reductions of emissions. Now, the problem here is that in order to commit or in order to target, you actually have to report. So, you cannot commit or have a target if you are not reporting. And they use the whole data. So when you actually exclude the non-reported, so imagine that you actually run the same regression, but now you only allow firms that are reporting, the results change. So this is the table, and I want you to see two interesting things that happened. First, the results of the target do not change, in the sense that when we only concentrate on reported firms that actually are voluntarily reporting, having a target does have a negative impact on the negative, meaning CO2 emissions improve. When I say negative impact, means that this goes down. So the percentage of CO2 emissions actually goes down, but commitment becomes purely cheap talk. So commitment actually disappears. So commitment is very correlated with the fact that you are reporting. And when you actually eliminate the data that has a bias, remember the data was imputed with a bias, which is the precautionary principle, then this result disappears. So one is commitments truly, in our sample, they seem to be unimportant. Target, it seems to be important. And science-based targets are interesting because in order to get a target, it's not a statement, it's a process of evaluation. So what firms do is that they first commit, and then in a period of 2 years, they go through a process of evaluation where the organization determines whether or not you have a target, or if the target is realistic, or that your emissions are correct. So there's a verification process. that takes place. And then they upgrade you. It's an upgrade from commitment to target. Not everybody that commits gets to a target. There are many firms that actually go into commitment, 2 years later they actually are kicked out, meaning that they cannot satisfy the conditions. So being committed is not a perfect predictor of target. So therefore, the target is indeed a signal that some of the emissions are correctly measured. So commitment might be cheap talk, but obtaining the status of target is not cheap talk. And we find that, the coefficients go down a little bit. They're not statistically different from each other, but they are significant in that sense. Now, what that means is that the average emissions are smaller. That doesn't mean that the emissions are going to go down in the future. And so I hope that there's a difference. Here, what we're doing is a cross-sectional. So what this is saying is that firms that obtain a science-based target initiative tend to be firms that are also have lower emissions and have higher efficiency, in the sense that they emit less CO2 for every dollar that they sell. So this is not a statement of causality, but it's a statement that they're related with each other. Now what we want to do is to evaluate the robustness of this when you add verification. So what type of signal is stronger? Is the target or the verification? And the verification is by a third party. So let's look at that result. In this regression, what we did was to take an information about whether or not the emissions were verified by a third party. This is not science-based target. The one that is verifying is the data from the carbon disclosure, and therefore they determine whether or not they report in data whether or not a third party has verified the information. So something that is very interesting, that we find amazingly interesting, is that so verified is the first row. The target in science-based target is the second row, and the commitment is the third one. So let me just show. So this is the fact that it's verified, and this is the standard deviations on the parentheses. This is the target, and this is the commitment. And so first, commitment is completely insignificant. So commitment is completely cheap talk. That result continues to be true. The target is significant and is associated with firms that tend to have lower emissions. Remember, this could be endogeneity, that if I have lower emissions, then I set and I go through the process of target. Is that clear? So there's kind of it could be an endogeneity that goes from the fact that I know I have lower emissions than my competitors, and therefore I will be able to afford and go through the target, and I can afford to have the signal. But what is very interesting is that when you verify, they tend to be firms that have higher emissions, and it's this can have many explanations. One is that the verification is a much difficult process of reporting, and therefore it is conceivable that on average the verifiers tend to kind of only verify when you commit mistakes that are on the upside, not on the downside. So the error that they want to commit is to overstate the emissions, not to understate. So that can be one of the process of the verification. And second, and very importantly, this could be something that firms that are that they know that they're estimating their emissions better, they don't mind to be verified. If I am manipulating my emissions, so I know that my emissions are lower than what they should be, or if somebody verifies, then I don't want to be verified. So there's a strategic decision where the firms that are kind of biasing downward their reports, they don't want to be verified, and therefore their emissions, their reported emissions, are smaller. Versus the ones that are kind of, and the honest will go and report. But then the second one is the actual measurement per se, is that the verification actually is a process that might actually increase the emissions, just because the verifier will be more conservative than the firm itself. This is very interesting because this is on the total amount of emissions. When we actually look at the time series, asking the question, do the emissions go down? What is super interesting is that indeed, again, so I'm going to just concentrate on the last one. Notice, this is the verification, this second line is a target, and this line here is a commitment. So again, commitment has no effect. Commitment has no effect on today's emissions and also on the path of emissions moving forward. So the trend is the same. But if you have a verification, what is very interesting is that both efficiency or intensity and total emissions are going down. So a firm that does go through the process of verification is doing a costly signal today, and that in some sense might be signaling that they know that their emissions are going to be going down faster in the future. This cannot be done explained by a precautionary principle. I mean, it's difficult to assume that you become more lax as time goes. That doesn't make any sense from the verifier point of view. So this is, to us, a very interesting result. The target has a very small effect moving forward. First, on the intensity is zero, no effect on the intensity, and this is just barely significant. So actually, it's significant only at 10%. So the target has a. So in other words, it is more likely that the science-based target is due to a strategic decision than the verification itself. Why this is important? It's just so we are not done yet, but one of the interesting explanations or at least questions that I tend to have is what happens when you have a better measurement or more conservative measurement. So you would assume that if you look at the measurement of anything, so the measure of something that the firm has, the day I impose kind of a bigger measurement or a better measurement, I expect the measurement of bad things to go up. And then, because you are fixing them, they might actually go down. So I find that, I mean, we don't have evidence yet, but this is what we're searching for. But I find that there's different signals that the firms can perform. So the signals based on the science-based target initiative, there are two types. The commitment tends to be cheap talk, and the other one, which is the target, tends to be a signaling that the firms are better in terms of emissions, but better on total emissions today, not necessarily better on the path of emissions moving forward. So this is an important distinction, because, I mean, again, the science-based target index is a costly signal. You have to go through a process, you have to pay, and by the way, sometimes you don't get upgraded from commitment to target, but it mostly seems to be a signal that you are good today, and that's different. Now, when you go to the CDP, it's a different data set. You can, you cannot report. Okay, not report. That's one. You can report, but then you can report with verification. And this aspect of verification, again, is a very costly signal. And you can imagine that the signal is becoming no report is no signal. Reporting is a costly signal. We don't know if reporting is good or bad because of all the imputation that we do. You say it's just we will assume that reporting is good, but reporting is good not because it's actually good, is because the way we're assuming what your emissions will be if you don't report. So you have to be very careful with that. It is conceivable that reporting is complete cheap talk as well, but reporting plus verification, and especially for independent verification, that does have a very important impact, and I think that the path looks like this, and we have to find evidence of that. Why this is important? This is to fix a problem, you have to measure better, and the day you measure better, you're more likely to be surprised on the bad side. So think about a firm that thinks, especially on social issues, that you think that you're mistreating your workers in some form. If you talk to an expert and you say, well, I do think that I am mistreating women in my company, what could I do? the first thing that they're going to say is, well, you need to have a system that reports and counts, the degree of dissatisfaction that you have in your firm. So you will run a survey, or you will put a whistleblower system, but you will do something. And I can assure you, the day you put that, the number of cases, bad cases, is going to be high, much higher than before. Before you were not reporting, or before it was just anecdotes. Now you have a report. So what it means is that the number of cases of abuse in the company for the workers, for example, is going to increase. So the number of complaints is going to increase. Now the only way to improve is to count them better. And this is important because the data will deteriorate in the short run. Okay, so if the market is not patient enough, like what Carol always says, and so Carol says that you need to have the long-term investor. It's not only a long-term investor; it has to be a long-term investor. Is patient. You have to be willing, as that investor, to understand that this deterioration that is taking place here is actually the way to do the investment, so you can get this improvement here. So in that sense, I think it's a patience. You have to still be patient. You're not only looking at long-term indicators, but you have to be patient enough to understand that in the short run, measures will deteriorate. We tend to find that with the verification, we find this result is kind of interesting, and also is a way to start distinguishing the value of these different signals. Of course, we are not done, but I hope that this video helped a little bit disseminate the results faster to you, and that when the paper is, when we get the first draft, you will get for sure get the PDF and the link immediately. Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.